Welcome to Inadequate Mother. We are going to be talking about relationships today because I have to say, if there's one area of life I think I am mostly inadequate, it's definitely going to be with relationships. And let's be honest, looking back, taking a step back, looking at society, it's definitely an area where we struggle. So I'm lucky enough to have a guest to talk to me today. I'm not just going to waffle on. And this is a professional relationship coach called Anne Skelton. I'm really excited to ask her my burning questions because, well, frankly, a relationship coach sounds to me like money well spent, isn't it, when it's such a significant area of our lives. We're going to be discussing in particular the stigma around single moms dating and trying to find love, because I'll honestly say from experience, I've been a mum now for 18 years, a single mum for 11. I have been in a 5-year relationship where I was engaged, but that was long distance from England to America. Whole different story. I've had multiple kind of dating partners, and I am now in a healthy relationship of 18 months. Never really lived with anyone. So it's been a bit of a roller coaster in terms that it's never really been stable. I never found that one, moved them in and set up home. And I know it's an area where my kids go, "Mom, what's so bloody hard? Why have you not settled down like Dad? Why is it so difficult?" So those are the questions that I really want to zone in on. Single mothers, actually doing solo travel, because it was an incredible thing for me to discover solo travel as a single mom. And also thirdly, I want to discuss just general relationships, not romantic relationships. I want to discuss friendships, because those are even appearing to be difficult in a world where we're just constantly on the go all the time. So let's get into the Inadequate Mother and welcome our guest. Really excited to have this conversation about relationships. Why? Because it's the area in my life that I am the most inadequate. Not because I'm some mad monster that just can't connect with people, but just because I think for mums, single mums especially, it can just be really challenging. So I'd love to discuss in terms of what you do and how you help people. I would like to know your opinions and kind of some advice you have for mothers that are struggling as a lonely solo mom, or just a married mom that's finding it hard to bond with their partner because every life is just so overwhelming. So, Anne, what is it you do?
Hi, thanks for having me, Hayley. So an accredited coach. I specialise in relationships, and I do also do life coaching and a bit of business coaching, but I do really enjoy relationship coaching.
Okay. So how does that look? I mean, what set you up with that type of business, and how do you help people? What's the process involved?
Well, I think like most of us, you go through a problem in life and then you find out how you can fix it, and then you want to qualify in that and find out how you can help other people fix it. So having had relationship problems myself, we sought out a relationship coach, and I really enjoyed the ethos and the whole idea of looking forward rather than looking back, and thought, "Oh, I'd like to share this with other people." So I went and got myself qualified.
Okay. So do you work with like the couple together, or do you have separate sessions, or?
Well, mostly we work together because we're looking at all the things that can be done to move forward, and they both need to be part of that. Having said that, there are times when I think one person could do with an extra session on their own.
How do you break
Um,
that to them?
it usually is very obvious in the session, even for them. And I say that I've got concerns about how they're feeling about themselves, and that it's really important to have a look at what I can do to help them with that first. And I will often offer a separate session to both. So it's not just like suggesting that one person is at fault and, that they're not feeling great about themselves. So therefore they're not bringing the best to their relationship. It could be the other person as well. So, it's never one-sided.
Yeah. So would that session look more like a life coaching session where you're zoning in other aspects of that person's life and how they talk to themselves, what they think about themselves?
Yeah, I mean, it could vary, but most of the time it's just helping them to understand where in their life, particularly their childhood and young adulthood, that they can see patterns forming that have created their behavior in a relationship.
Yeah. I think for me, I really got fed up with searching for love and dating online and kind of meeting people that were in a way broken, because if you are, I kind of like said to myself, I'm only going to date, single dads because they have to understand me as a mother. And I tried to date people that didn't have kids. It was great because they had more flexibility, more time, but they just didn't get that side of me. I wasn't able to connect with them. So, but when you do date single dads, there's a level of brokenness. They've gone through a lot of trauma, that breakdown of their relationship and family and what have you. So it was very much a case of forming these relationships with people that had gone through so much and were, struggling in their relationship. So I think definitely if I met a guy that's like, I'm having kind of life coaching sessions or a relationship coach, like I would just be so attracted to that, because I just think there's nothing you can just invest in terms of like so what is it,
Yeah.
where do you start with your clients? How do you know where to start?
Well, we first of all start, generally speaking, the first session involves me finding out from them what they want to get from the coaching and what they want to get from their relationship. So what's missing, what isn't going right, and then looking at how we can fix that. So won't be surprised to hear that communication is quite high up on the list. It's almost certainly every couple. The second one that I've come across, and it might be different for other people, but certainly for me, it's understanding. So it's being able to understand each other. And actually, more importantly, and I've definitely come across that very recently with somebody who, honestly, she's doing great. She wasn't really keen to look at herself at all at the beginning. But just helping people understand themselves first, because if you understand yourself, then you've got much better tools and much better ability to understand other people and to tolerate them, because we are all different and we do things differently. And, we load the dishwasher differently. We make the bed or don't make the bed differently. There are so many very small things that are so different. Even intimacy, hugging and holding hands and things like that. Some people are really comfortable with it and others are not. And, just having those differences doesn't make it impossible to be together. It's just about understanding that about each other. So if you understand, I'm very much, a hugger and a toucher, and my husband really isn't. But if I do it first, then I receive it back. He wouldn't think to kind of just come up and hug me.
No, yeah, it's love languages, isn't it? I think that was
Yeah, there's
mad.
love languages as well, which strangely I say mine is quality time. It is my top one, but out of the 5, I'm very high scoring on 4 of them.
What are the 5 love languages for the listeners that aren't?
You've got receiving gifts, you've got quality time, intimate touch, words of affirmation, and I know I'm always bound to forget one, aren't I? Intimate touch, quality time,
Acts
receiving
of
gifts,
service.
service, yeah,
Acts
and
of
words of
service
affirmation.
is me.
I should
Um,
remember that one because that's my husband.
yeah, I am an acts of service, and you can find out through a questionnaire online what your love
Yes,
language
there are
is.
free tests online, yep.
Yeah, and when I realised that mine was acts of service, I was like, now I know why a man in a tool belt just really does it for me. Like, and it's been like that since I was young. I'll be
Yeah.
like, oh, what's happening? Oh, he's got a tool belt on. Oh, But honestly, and
Brilliant.
I think it's just gotten even bigger because I've been a very independent mom that's had to do DIY themselves and
Yeah.
do everything. So when someone does something for me, I love it. But my most enlightening moment was when I realised that how we want to receive it. So the acts of love that we want to give. So like I do. So basically, I was doing acts of service to other people in a
And not
bid
understanding why
to
they
try and
weren't
get
doing it
acts
back.
of service to me, but that wasn't their love language. So they actually found that really annoying and really intrusive. Like, why are you cooking for me all the time? Like, are you trying to control me? And I'm like, no, 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 I'm just doing nice acts of service. So it's about like realizing actually it's not as it is important to understand ourselves, but it's also important, even more so, to understand the person you're trying to love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to understand their love languages. And look, mine's quality time, so I would quite happily spend lots of time with people. But if their love language isn't quality time, I'm not filling their love bank in any way whatsoever. So I have to recognize that, and certainly when you have children, you know that their love languages mean something too. So you have to adjust to each person, and you have to be willing to do that, because it's not fair to just expect our needs to be met. We also have to meet the needs of our partner.
That's interesting you said that about children. I've never even thought to do, as a mom, a love language questionnaire with my children. Do you know if there's any special love language questionnaires for kids? Because if there isn't, there should be.
Yeah, if you type in love languages quiz, then you've got the option to choose love languages for kids. It actually does come up with that.
Questionnaires for kids to determine their love language could be groundbreaking. Why didn't I think to do that for my kids? Because I'm so trying to do one thing for my older that might have done for my do for my younger that I might have done for my older, but realizing that's not working sometimes. So yeah, that's amazing. Okay, definitely putting that in the list of things to do.
Yeah, there is also, because I really love DISC. DISC standing for dominance, influence, steadiness, and compliance. I also love that profiling, and you can do a free test of that as well. I use 123test.com, and there's a free test there, so you can find out your own personality profile, but also your kids, your husband, your wife, your partners, whatever. And you can also, you know, if there's somebody that you're struggling with to get on, but they're close enough that you can say, "Oh, I did this test online. Would you be interested in doing it?" and sending it to them, and then just chatting with them and finding out what their result is. It will help you to understand them a little bit better as well, because we are all so different.
What is DISC? Say that again. DISC. So it's like a personality test.
Yeah. So dominance, influence, steadiness, and compliance. Dominance is all about just getting the job done. You know, they're not very well people orientated, because it is just about getting the job done. It's functional. You've got the influence profile. That's me. And they're all about, didn't I do well? So I'll often find myself, and I suspect you're an influence profile
Mm.
too, but you often find yourself saying, "Oh, I did this and this today, and wasn't I great?"
The big heads is basically what you're
And then you've
saying.
got the
The big
then you've got the
heads.
steadiness profile, which is they're all about how everything is for you. They're more concerned about everybody else than they are about themselves.
Codependent, would that be come under? Yeah.
Not necessarily, but could potentially. And then you've got compliance profile, which is non-emotional. They're quite independent, don't really need people. They're not people orientated at all. They're much more task orientated. So they're the planners of the world. They're the engineers of the world, generally speaking. So they're the people that there has to be a plan. You can't just do it. Influence will just do it and find out if it goes wrong. We'll find a way to fix it. Steadiness will think about all the things that might go wrong. They like to be part of a team, so they're less likely to do something independently.
Mm,
And then, as I say, the dominance is all about just getting the job done. They they like change, quite like a challenge. They can be
yeah.
a bit blunt and direct.
I'm wondering why dating apps have not I might be wrong, they may have. It's been a while. I've been in my relationship now for 18 months and it's going okay. There's some, no relationship is perfect. Just
Nope.
putting that out there for anybody that
That's
follows my
absolutely true.
Instagram.
Yeah.
And also just to say, if you do have any questions or conversations, get at me at Hayley Brown and Co on Instagram, where I would love to explore this. I think this is an episode that I'm going to repeat because, like I said, relationships are where we struggle in society.
Yeah.
But in terms of dating apps, I know that people are just fed up of it. I wonder why they haven't introduced kind of like these types of questionnaires. And do you think it would hinder it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how dating apps work. Perhaps it is something I should familiarise myself with a lot more. But
Do your clients not meet on dating apps, or do you generally do married couples that have met the old-fashioned way?
do you know what? I would say that's very varied. And probably most of them, it has been a conventional way rather than a dating app. But and I know a lot of people are moving away from dating apps now, and to all intents and purposes, it is much better to meet somebody face to face. You have that instant rapport, that instant connection, and that's what leads you on to having sort of a more deep relationship, more connection. You meet somebody on a dating app, and the thing is, with dating apps, you don't always know what you're going to get because we can pretend to be something else until we actually are involved in the relationship, and then the real selves come out. But it could be good to have some sort of personality profiling because opposites do attract. You'll often hear me say that with a steadiness and compliance profile or steadiness profile, that they kind of tend to be the calm to the craziness of an I profile or a dominance profile. And equally, the calmness is attractive to the dominance and influence profiles because we're not particularly calm. We live life sort of like 100 miles an hour and are constantly looking for something else to do, and we don't plan. Whereas we can be quite attracted to people who are much calmer and more slow to make decisions and much more relaxed and chilled. And because we don't have that sense of chilled, um, yeah, it can be attractive.
I think with extroverts and introverts, that's always really interesting, that dynamic. And someone that's extroverted almost needs an introvert, and vice versa. An introvert needs an extrovert, and they can really leverage off each other. And I've definitely had that in my relationships. And I think it comes to a point, however, that sometimes if you have too many introverts in your circle that don't want to go out, don't want to do anything, and then you can feel really depleted
And start losing yourself.
Yeah, and I think you just have to be, like you said, it's really comes down to really knowing yourself. What have you said to your clients that you might have one person, I'm not going to gender role or say like the woman's quite emotionally, aware or reflective or whatever, more so than the man. But I would say women probably are known for talking a little bit more. So what would you say if you had a couple that one's done a lot of work on knowing themselves, a lot of reflective work, doing all the questionnaires, and then someone's just kind of switched off to that and they don't even know what that is, and they've got a lot of catching up to do in terms of how do you deal with that? Because I think sometimes people can maybe get offended if you kind of suggest these things.
Yeah, I mean, I do have couples where one has started the journey of, self-reflection and self-development. And what happens when you go on that journey is people who aren't on that journey it becomes much more highlighted that they're on that journey. So what we have to be careful of when we are on the self-development journey and we've started to recognize things about ourselves is not to be too hard on the partner that isn't doing that. And I often hear myself saying, just remember that they are, a few years behind you or a few months behind you on this journey. They're just starting it now and you're already on the journey. So be patient with them, give them the time to learn the things. They've brought me in for a reason. And if I'm there to help them, then give me the opportunity to help them, because if you're already 10 steps ahead, you need to give them a chance to catch up.
I think I heard someone say about that in terms of self-development. Oh, you can be it's all about self-development now, but to be really truly self-developed, you have to have an amount of grace for people that maybe aren't, and not get frustrated that they're not in the same place you are.
Yeah, well, part of the self-development journey is that you do learn not to get frustrated, because getting frustrated, you haven't done that self-development. So you have to be able to acknowledge that somebody is doing something different and it's okay. So I akin this to, like, I was always very particular about things and I wanted everything done a certain way. And, if it wasn't done that way, I was not happy about it. I wouldn't necessarily be kicking and screaming about it, but you have to sort of look at it and think, well, okay, the job is getting done, so does it matter how? So my husband, when he hangs the laundry out, he will hang the pants up sideways. And he will hang, dresses and jumpers from the shoulders, which, you get the peg marks and stuff like that. But the ultimate aim is to get the washing on the line and get it dry. Okay. So does it matter how it gets hung out? Equally, we have a lot of people who want the dishwasher done a set way, and and trust me, there's a few people living in our house, because my daughter and her boyfriend live with us with their children, and we all do the dishwasher differently.
I've had rows. I couldn't believe that one of my exes came over and was like, "You've just nearly killed me," like, because he cut himself with a knife. I had to put the knife in the wrong way, and I was like, "Don't have a dishwasher at house. I've never owned a dishwasher. I'm really sorry." He blew up.
Did my best.
I would say, because obviously I do want to keep this episode, solely for the kind of the mamas out there that are trying to find love. I do connect with a lot of mums that are like, "Hayley, I've watched your whole journey from when you split up with your ex." I was in a long distance relationship for 5 years, and I used to go back and forth to America for 5 years every 6 weeks. That was insane, but it really taught me a lot. And I know that period of my life was really important, because I had to be on my own, because I was living on my own and I was feeling loved. I was in this relationship and he wasn't able to be close to me, but it just helped me learn about myself. And unfortunately, COVID happened and it ended. And then, I've shared a lot of my journey, and I'm now in a relationship that is probably the healthiest. And it's definitely been the hardest, because it's the healthiest. And that makes people question, like, why? And I did an episode on codependency where I was talking to a life coach, Claire, who just massively related to this, because we're both codependents and we need to be needed. We need that intensity and that trauma bonds and all those things that we've had in the past. And when you don't have those, you can kind of flatline, and it's like, okay, what's going on? But learning about myself and then trying to encourage my partner to learn is definitely, and just doing that a bit more gently, is definitely the way forward. And attachment styles is the other questionnaire that's out there. What are the attachment styles? Tell me about those, and I'll tell you what mine is.
So you've got your anxious, preoccupied, secure, avoidant, dismissive, and fearful, avoidant.
Okay. And I'm definitely fearful, avoidant, I would say.
Fearful, avoidant, or avoidant, dismissive?
What's the difference?
The fearful avoidant is a mix of the anxious preoccupied and the avoidant dismissive. So you will have had a traumatic or chaotic childhood,
Yeah, that'll be
where
me.
things, and a lot of your emotional needs weren't met.
Definitely. I lost my mum to alcoholism when I was 25, and you can only imagine for that to occur. I think she died when she was 45. So childhood was, and she was a single mom as well. She never found love again. And ultimately, I think she died because she was lonely. She drank because she was lonely. So I think fear, having watched this in The Mom That Raised You, I think I definitely have always associated some fear with being lonely, because it almost certainly contributed to my mum's death. If that doesn't sound dramatic, but it is the case. So definitely having some fear of being alone, and maybe not realizing that I've had to be alone with my feelings and my thoughts to understand
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah. Yeah. So what have you learned about yourself so far as a result?
What have I learned by being on my own? There's a lot about my personality that I think because I didn't want to be on my own so desperately, I would try and shape myself into something that somebody wanted me to be.
Right.
So, my ex, for example, didn't like the fact that I was doing social media, but I really loved it. I really loved connecting. I really loved being creative, making videos. And I think because my mum had been so ashamed of her alcoholism, had not spoken about it, and didn't have anyone to speak about it, I just was determined to be the opposite. And I was like, I'm going to talk about everything that makes people uncomfortable. And he didn't like that. So, but it was really part of who I was, in terms of my value. And I was starting to understand that part of me. And yeah.
So almost certainly an influence profile, because we share everything and wear our heart on our sleeves.
Mm.
So I'd say that your ex was possibly a steadiness or compliant profile who are much more private and don't like to share everything about themselves.
Well, he was American, and he,
So yeah, almost certainly compliance then, because Americans normally, will tell you anything.
yeah, no, to be honest, he did share his heart, but it was always in a way to match the kind of hero that he was. So if anything shied away from that, if I was basically really cringe back in the day. I was really embarrassing. I used to just share all kinds of like, oh, I've got IBS, look at my bloat and things, and he'd be like, do you have to? And I'm like, yeah, why should I talk about that? Like, so
Why shouldn't we?
yeah, I can understand why he and I know my partner now probably wouldn't like that, but he's less about make it like it doesn't affect him as much. Um, and I think that's because when I met him, I was just very much, this is me, you know, take it or leave it. And I think, do you think that's how it needs to get to? Do you think as moms, as single moms, it's really important to like get to know yourself and be happy with who you are before you enter into a relationship?
Yeah, for sure. There is an element though of being it's you definitely need to be yourself, and you shouldn't. No one should ever want to change you as a person. But part of the self development journey is to understand you and the impact of you on other people. So, for example, for your partner that didn't like you sharing things, if you found a way that you could compromise, or that he could just accept that you share things, or vice versa, you accept that he, doesn't like you sharing things, it's difficult because there has to be some compromise. Um, but you should never change who you are for anybody. So you should never find yourself in a situation where you're doing everything to make the relationship work,
Mm. But
because
tweak, do we tweak things? Is there a difference between like tweaking and changing who you are?
yeah, because our behavior is not us. Our behavior is learned.
Right. That's
So
interesting.
how we react to things has come from our childhood and, you know, things that have happened to us as a child and, you know, how that then impacts us in intimate relationships. And we're not always aware of that. So being able to understand that and then understand that we respond to things in a certain way is what we need to look at. So, for example, if you're sitting there saying to yourself, oh, he doesn't love me, he doesn't care about me, or vice versa, she doesn't love me, she doesn't care about me, then you have to ask yourself, is that the truth or is that your own belief? And is it your own belief based on how you feel about yourself? Because if we don't love ourselves, then it's very easy to say he or she doesn't love us. So if we learn to love ourselves, and I saw a great video once, and I can't remember who it was, but I do get my clients to do this because I think it's fantastic, is to look in the mirror and literally look yourself in the eyes and say, I love you 10 times every day.
Do that. Everybody do that.
Do it. Honestly, it is brilliant. And I for the clients that I recommend it to, at first, I mean, I've just literally worked with a couple yesterday, and in their first session, I asked her to do that because there was very clear evidence that throughout her childhood, she hadn't ever really been praised or felt that her parents were proud of her. So the actual thought of looking at herself in the mirror and saying, I love you, made her cry because she had the realization that she could actually love herself and that was okay. And honestly, the change in her from the first session to the second session yesterday is unbelievable. You can see it in her face. You know, when I first saw her, you could see that she was downtrodden. She was, you know, she almost looked 10 years younger when I saw her yesterday.
But it's hard. I mean, a lot of people talk about that, but it really is, and it's a hard thing. I think for if I take myself back to my 20s and someone said, "Oh, you just got to learn to love yourself," like like how? And I know for me, being in a church environment, I'm not a religious person now, but just being in an environment where people were going, I fucked up this week, I'm a sinner, you know, we all still love each other, we all love you, you're loved, Jesus loves you, all that kind of stuff on a regular basis. I did that for a couple of years and I was just like, I'm loved, I need to love myself, and not tweak the things that I didn't love myself, but kind of just reflect on them, understand why they've developed. Like, for instance, losing my temper with my kids and, you know, completely turning into a horrendous monster, but then just understanding why am I connecting with my kids in this way, and forgiving myself a little bit more. And I think when you forgive yourself for it, you can start to love yourself a little bit more, and then share with the people that you're trying to love.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not here to promote any kind of religion or anything like that. But having grown up as a Catholic, I can tell you that religion is not necessarily really healthy. You mentioned it yourself there that you always have to go and confess your sins. You know, oh, I've done this wrong. You know, and that sets you up for failure because if you've done something wrong, you failed. Whereas, you know, and as I say, I'm not promoting any religion, but the Buddhist religion is much more about internal. It's much more about you being the best version of you and being able to control yourself in situations and not get angry, not get frustrated, not get bitter, you know. And I think that's actually quite a good philosophy. And I love that it's all about inside you. Nobody comes and injects us with anger. It's a belief system that we have. It's something that we create based on something that's happened in our childhood and how that then manifests when someone behaves in a certain way that creates the same emotional response. It just triggers us into having that same emotional response. So if we learn to acknowledge that we have a trigger, accept the emotion that comes with it, and then adjust our behavior so that we can really think about whether we need to believe what we're telling ourselves or whether that person really didn't intend it to be that way.
Like in terms of Buddhism, I've never explored that, but finding somewhere that really unlocks those parts of you that enables you to, because you have all the answers, it's just about unlocking the parts that you need to explore and having that environment that does that. I think with me in church, it was more to do with, and this is why I've called the podcast Inadequate Mothers, is because it's where I first felt connection really with anything out of this place of fear and deviance that I'd put myself as this failed person that was going, had so much trauma. And I think connecting with people that went, me too, fucked up too, trauma too, inadequate too, is just where I felt that connection. So it wasn't so much the religion and getting things right. It was the fact that I was surrounded by people that were opening up to being the same, inadequate, and just realizing that we are all inadequate. We just are on a journey, a learning journey, and
Yeah.
just, yeah.
Yeah, learning about ourselves. And look, one way to really learn about ourselves is to spend time with ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
And we don't often do that these days. And just really switching off and completely switching off and really looking at, if you're going through any relationship difficulties at the moment, the best questions to ask yourself is, what am I doing that isn't helping?
Do you encourage solo travels? Because the reason I say is in a couple of weeks, the next episode is going to be an episode on mothers doing solo trips. A mom messaged me and she was like, Hayley, I know you've done some solo trips. You've shared a lot. I really want to go and explore myself on my own. Have you got any advice? Do you think that's something that can help a relationship?
Well, I honestly believe that you need to have separate interests and you need to do things separately so that you have things to talk about. Otherwise, you end up being a bit codependent, and then, as a result, you just stop doing things independently, and then slowly but surely the relationship erodes. So I think it is important to have some time to do things on your own. I do think going on trips is okay. Going out with your friends is okay. It should never be questioned. If it is, then I have concerns about the relationship, because nobody should be telling you what you should and shouldn't do.
I wonder if any of the listeners can relate to the fact that I would say I've tolerated relationships that I shouldn't have tolerated, friendships, girlfriends, and maybe romantic relationships, because I really associated travel with having someone to travel with, because travel was just always just something that fed my soul. It was who I was. And I just realized, like, I need to go on trips. I need to travel, but I couldn't possibly go on my own. So I would tolerate these relationships and I would feel like I needed a relationship to have that. So when I did do a solo trip, it was the most invigorating thing that I could have done, because it was like this, it dawned on me that actually I don't need to lower my tolerance and be in these relationships that I probably shouldn't be in, just so I have someone to travel with. And I wonder if anyone can relate to that. And if you can, please let me know, because I'd love to connect with you on that.
Yeah, I mean, you said two key things there. I have a question when I first speak to clients, and I ask them about healthy boundaries and whether they do things that energize them, make them feel ready to face the world, whether they're able to say no if they need to, and so on. And two things that you just said there make me feel really happy, because it's great that you've recognized it. So for you, traveling is all about invigorating you and feeding your soul. And that helps you to bring 100% of you to the relationship, 100% of the best version of you. And this is what a lot of us don't recognize. We feel that we need to have somebody in our lives to give us that invigoration, to feed our souls, and we don't. And, and I know some people might sort of think, "Oh, what is she on about?" Um, there are some couples that are very happy doing everything together,
Yeah,
and that's
I
fine.
know.
That's absolutely fine because it works for them. If it wasn't working for them, then they're missing something and they're not bringing 100% of themselves to the relationship. So if it's working for them and they're bringing 100% of themselves to the relationship, then good for them. It's absolutely fine. But if you're not doing things that invigorate you and feed your soul, and you're not doing them because you think you have to do something else to keep the other person happy, then ultimately that is going to be part of the downfall of your relationship. Because while you're not being yourself and 100% of yourself, you're not bringing the best of you to your relationship.
Definitely. Yeah, 100%. And I think in terms of these red flags that you see when you're trying to find love, it is hard not to want to ignore the things that you can see and then think, oh, it doesn't matter, we'll sort it out later.
And that's never, ever going to happen. The one thing I can tell you now is don't ignore the red flags unless you feel it's something you can compromise on.
In terms of you yourself accept, yeah.
You either accept or can you compromise by, let me see if I can think of an example. I suppose it doesn't really matter what it is, because at the end of the day, you can either compromise on it or you can't. And if you can't compromise on it, that red flag is not going to go down. It is not going to go down that flagpole and not happen again. If it's a red flag, it's a red flag. If it's a red flag for you, it's going against your morals and your values. It's not going to change.
I definitely think that I have been blessed with a lot of good girlfriend relationships. I've had some not crappy, but just because I needed to constantly not be on my own, I would go out partying just so that I could not be in the house on my own. Then I would have these group of party girls. I didn't connect with in any other way than going out partying. And then I had a group of mum friends. Well, I'd say actually, because I was 20 when I became a mum, I had this one friend and we were just so aligned. We ended up living together. And I would say she saved me in so many ways. That relationship saved me to the fact that we actually ended up living together as single mums. And we were like mum and wife, like we were like mum wives. And she had a child the same age as my child. We lived together. And then we ended up getting back with our exes, and all 6 of us, so there was one child each, and the 2 parents, couples, we all lived in this massive house. And I always feel sad for mums that haven't had that connection with another woman, especially single mums that are like, how have you, thrived to who you are now? I'm like, it's because I had this girl. She had my back in every way. Like, what is it in terms of knowing how people connect now in a different way in this digital age? How can we advise moms to try and make their mum friendships a bit easier and a bit more authentic and sincere? Because I feel like sometimes moms just aren't sincere. They feel like they've got to behave a certain way, and that's why I've called it inadequate mother, because I don't want to talk to the perfect mom. I want to talk to the mess. That's who I want to connect.
Well, there's no perfect person, is there? So ultimately, there's no perfect wife, no perfect husband, no perfect mother, no perfect father. So we are all here learning for the first and last time. We don't get an instruction manual on how to live life. That comes from reading books, speaking to people, listening to advice, taking it or not. We all learn things as we go along. Some of us learn quicker than others, and some of us never learn, and that's okay. Friends, as they say, come into your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. It doesn't make any difference if they've only come in for a reason or a season or a lifetime, as long as you've learned something from it, right? Keeping friends is it's probably very similar to keeping relationships. Understanding yourself, so therefore you can then understand your friends. Um, and once you can understand your friends, you can understand whether they're going to be there for a reason, a season, or a lifetime.
Yeah, I think understanding. I think for me, I had to really work on my boundaries in terms of not just cutting. A lot of girlfriends now, they will cut someone out, and there's a lot of social media kind of promotion is that cut them out. They're not serving you, cut them out. And I don't really like that, because we need community. If there's one thing I know society's struggling with, it's community. We've just got to understand it a bit better. So for me, I like to not necessarily cut people out, just understand what they are and what they're not, and understand and manage my expectations of that person by understanding who they are and what they're not, and focus on what they are rather than focus on what they're not, and then cutting them out, and getting upset because they're not being this person that I need, and just saying, okay, but they are this. And the same goes, and that helped me like myself more, because I'd be like, okay, I'm not that, but I am this, and I like this. And if you want a bit of this, this is what I am. You know what I mean? And just focus on what I am and not what I'm not. And I'll do the same with you. And we don't need to cut people out. We just need to manage our expectation and our boundaries. So yeah, this cut it out. I don't like it.
I mean, it's a bit of an extreme term, but I think you sent me the video, didn't you, about let them?
Is that what the whole
That's kind of
let them theory?
of,
It's going off with
that not everybody is going to stay in your life forever, and that's okay. If you think back to when you were at school and you had all these friends at school and you slowly lose contact with them, it's because they've gone on to live their lives. Sometimes because we're not going on and living our lives, we don't understand why they're not still in touch with us. I've got a friend that I've had since I was 6 years old, and we might not see each other sometimes for years. But when we do, it's like there was never any space between us. And often we don't even speak to each other on the phone, or she knows I'm here if she needs me, and vice versa. She's my longest standing friend. And, we know that we're there for each other. Doesn't mean we have to be with each other every day or go out together all the time. It's just about accepting that the friendship is at the level that it's at. And some friendships are much closer, and, geographically they're closer, so it's easier. Some friendships, I've got friends all over the world. I don't get to see them that much. I probably see some of them more than I see my friend in England, but we're still friends. And I think, as you say, it is about accepting that, but also sometimes you do have to accept, after putting in a lot of effort with one friend or another, that if the effort isn't reciprocated, when is the right time for you to cut that off? Because there's only so much you can do to maintain a friendship if the other person isn't doing it too.
I really thank you for this conversation. I could talk about this kind of thing all day. Thank you so much, Anne, for joining me. Where can we find you if anyone wants to get in touch or have any of your coaching?
Well, I am on all social media as Anne Skelton, and my website is nice and easy as well. It's anneskelton.com. So you can find everything that you need from the website. All the social media links are there. All my reviews are there. So yeah, just head to anneskelton.com. You'll find everything you need.